We're very patriotic.
Very patriotic, and this is the way to show it, huh?
And,
like
I mean, just in no layman's terms, we needed a gimmick of sorts.
Gotcha.
So,
this is it.
yeah.
Well, and because one of our missions is to revive the American dream.
Oh, there's also
So
that.
what better way?
Now, that American dream involves debt.
It can.
Well, for the country, it certainly does.
Right.
The country is riddled with debt.
Absolutely.
That's a do as I say, not as I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think everyone has either experienced or is currently experiencing is debt in some fashion. Some people say that there are good debts and there are bad debts.
Yep.
And those are commonly known as, like, a mortgage might be a good debt.
Well, there's a lot of people that
Credit card
say
might be a bad debt.
all debt is bad debt.
There are people who say that.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's that camp.
Right.
Is there anyone who says all debts are good?
Maybe people that are trying to justify
Congressman?
the tons of credit card debt that they're in, or when, yeah. We just created a budget that has spending in which we don't have any funds for. Debt's great.
Yeah, debt is good
Debt is
now.
great, yeah.
Yes.
And somebody's going to pay for that.
Somebody's got to pay for it
Right.
eventually.
Exactly.
Now, what we have today, we actually have some cool graphs to show that you guys brought in today.
Yeah, we do.
And this is, now we're going to be taking a look at mortgage, particularly in this case, right? Mortgage expense versus investing, that kind of thing.
Let's talk about debt, baby.
Baby.
Let's talk about you and Wells Fargo. Let's talk.
So, why Wells Fargo?
Nah, they were in the news recently for doing something else bad.
Yeah, something else bad. Add to the list. So, when we talk about debt in general, now we're going to look at mortgage debt today. I think a lot of people believe, and I would agree with them, that credit card debt is not good. Or as you like to say, credit card debt is bad, okay? Because it's
bad, okay?
It's bad, okay? Because, at the end of the day, there's really no benefit. There's no benefit, and it's not a situation where you can sort of out-invest your cost.
Right.
Whereas you guys believe with the mortgage you could do that.
Well, the simplest example I can give, in when people talk about money, is a lot of times people say, money is the root of all evil, or money is evil, right? Things like that. And I would expand that to say that money is neutral, and it just makes you more of who you are on the underlying side. So if I'm a generous person and I have money, I'm going to give more. If I'm a greedy person and I have money, I'm going to do things to get more money. And I think that kind of goes with debt too. Like, all debt is relatively neutral. It's just you have to look at the underlying, how it's being used. How is a person approaching the use of the debt? So am I using credit cards to finance things that I can't pay for on my own? Like, I'm buying a TV on credit card because I don't have that money in the bank. That would be an example of where that's not being used properly. And then there's ways to use debt really properly. And then that's essentially what we teach when we look at these kind of things, is that there isn't really a black or white answer to it. It's really the gray area of how are people approaching it psychologically.
Yeah, and then so the idea is, if you're taking on a debt because you
need coffee,
you have no other option, then that could be a red flag. Whereas if you're taking on a debt because you say, you know what, I'm going to use my own money for another purpose that is more beneficial.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of camps out there. This is what Sean and I were talking about when we built this. There's a lot of camps out there, a lot of financial advisors, there's a lot of gurus and concepts and whatnot that teach to get rid of all of your debt. You should get rid of all of it as fast as you possibly can, as quickly as you possibly can. And to a certain degree, we just sit back and go, well, why? Like, what's the underlying thought process behind that?
Even if you look online and you try to find articles about debt, they all exude fear. Every single one of them. Nobody's talking about how to leverage debt. It's just fear-based. That's why when you think about debt, you think that it's wrong, and you try and get rid of all of it.
Yep.
It's all psychological.
So let's take a look at a very big debt that is related to a mortgage. So, Shauna, why don't you tell us what we're looking at here on the screen?
So what we're looking at right now is just a client who's making, I believe it's $44,000 a year, and that is their wealth building potential.
That's what we're
to
seeing.
age 66. So if you hover over the last bar, it will tell you the total amount of 1.3.
1.3.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I start adding in stuff here, tell us what happens.
Before you add in anything, I think it's important
Okay.
to mention
Yeah.
that the numbers, everything that's built here is testing a theory in a very prominent financial book. So this is actually testing Dave Ramsey's financial strategies that he talks about in his book, which is doing a 15-year mortgage and then investing money in something that can earn you a 12%. He says it multiple times in his book about a mutual fund that earns you 12%. Now, we don't know exactly where that is. We would love to find the mutual fund that earns 12% every single year. It sounds awesome.
After tax.
I mean, if we could find it, we'd probably stop teaching strategies and just focus on building that, for us. But it's just, again, it's testing something, because if you have advice that's out there and you're not testing or don't know how to test the advice you're getting, how do you know it's good?
Mm-hmm.
So we're just putting the irons to the fire here and testing what Dave Ramsey teaches to see how well it works out.
What does he teach?
So he teaches to get rid of your debt as fast as you possibly can. He teaches people to sign up for a 15-year mortgage. You pay it off as fast as possible. Get rid of your mortgage. And subsequently or simultaneously teaches that once that's done, stick that payment into an investment that can earn you 12%. And so that's what we built out here.
Gotcha.
Was, hey, if we did it based on his plan, 15 and 15, versus if we had a 30-year mortgage, what does it actually look like?
All right. And so this is essentially your savings potential, right? Accumulated over the period of time without any mortgages factored in.
Correct.
And I think it's pretty cool to spend just a moment looking at that. Like, this person in this instance has $1 million potential with only $44,000. I think sometimes we don't consider what our wealth building is with our continual revenue. And this person, just in this example, having 44,000, is a wealth building machine. If they could manage it properly, end up with $1 million of creation. It's pretty, amazing, really.
That's incredible. Yeah, it looks beautiful. This is exactly how everyone's equity curve should look, right?
Right. Well, again, and just for a baseline understanding, this is somebody taking 44,000 and sticking it just into a checking account, earning $0.
Gotcha.
So this is not invested at all. That's just 44,000 growing by adding it every year.
Okay, so there's nothing added to this.
Nothing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So where is the first place we should go to see what's happening here?
So let's check off the San Diego property.
Okay. And what does this mean?
So the San Diego property, it doesn't have anything built into it, only because if you're looking at a 15 versus a 30-year mortgage, but it's on the same property, the property value isn't going to change.
Right.
And so we factored that out just from a standpoint of testing
Gotcha.
the numbers. So we clicked the San Diego property as a way to add the mortgage to the system.
Gotcha. Okay.
So San Diego property, we said, is, let's say, a $600,000 property that a client has a $500,000 mortgage on.
Okay.
And so...
We'll check off the mortgage of 15 years.
Mortgage of 15 years. Okay, so now we have a 15-year mortgage.
15-year
And that's going to eat into a lot of what our savings potential is
Yes.
over this period of time.
Coincidentally, as if we designed it in advance, that's the exact payment that a 15-year mortgage on $500,000 at current interest rates would be, is the 40-something thousand, 44 or whatever that it's being earned. And so it's basically for 15 years that's going directly to the mortgage, paying down the mortgage. And then the next 15 years it's just being saved in that same checking account.
Okay, so this just kind of shows you if you have the mortgage to buy the home, the gray here, what you're losing, that's your opportunity cost essentially. What you're losing there is just going to that mortgage payment. Now you have a house.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, well, I mean, if we're following the Dave Ramsey approach, we can't just stick the money in the savings. We have to invest it. We have to get that 12% mutual fund.
Okay.
So if you click off the 15-year investing button, that's that money now going into a mutual fund earning
12%.
12%. Oh, one other button. My bad. You got to actually add the investment. Boom.
There it is. Okay, so now we're seeing a little bit of a growth curve. And we're seeing that we did, let's see what our final number came to. So
in this scenario, you would have $408,000.
additional, right? So this would be better than just putting the money in the bank, earning zero.
Yep.
Correct.
And maybe that's as far as he went when he came up with the idea.
Right.
He's like, wait a minute, as opposed to just putting it in savings, let's do this instead.
Well, listen, a lot of people make financial decisions in a vacuum, right? They only look at one side of it. So the biggest proponents of 15-year mortgages talk about the interest that's saved. Well, sure, you're saving interest. But if you're not looking at the other side of that, which is what am I giving up as an opportunity cost in actually creating wealth elsewhere, then you're only looking at one side of the story. You're making a decision in a vacuum. And if you did that across every single financial piece, you're going to have a lot of stuff that doesn't work together.
So essentially, if you did, and this may be what Dave Ramsey did, who knows? If you did it in the order that we did it, you might get to this point and stop and say, oh man, look how much better this is. Look at that. I'm up $409,000 more than what I was thinking before. So let's do this.
Yeah.
And you just kind of stop there.
And that's if nothing goes wrong. That's if life doesn't throw you any curveballs.
Right.
Especially for that 15-year period where you're not saving anything.
Yeah, and we're assuming that we're making a lot of assumptions, but if we were testing and that's what we saw, this is what it would be. So how do we compare this now?
So to compare it, we start back at square one. We get rid of the 15-year mortgage and get rid of the 15-year investing.
Okay. Back to where we were.
And the taxable investment, just to make sure the numbers don't go all weird.
Okay.
And what we do first off is we add the 30-year mortgage.
Okay, let's add the 30-year mortgage. And that shows you right there. So this is your cost for the mortgage, essentially what it costs you to have the mortgage and opportunity cost, the gray.
Because the blue line is now what's being saved above the mortgage payment, which is less because it's not the $44,000.
Right.
So the blue line is if you're not investing, you're just sticking it in a savings account and you're paying a mortgage.
Gotcha.
So when we look at that, people, that might be someone looking at that going, oh yeah, the 15-year makes more sense. But now we got to throw investing in. So let's click the 30-year investing and the taxable investment.
Wow. Whoa. Look where this goes. Holy smokes.
Now, I'm not a huge expert in this realm, but I think 2.2 million is greater than 400,000.
So when we did the original calculation of just saving the money, you were going to have 1.3 million at age 66. Now you're looking at 3.5. When we did the 15-year, it was 1.7.
Yep.
So it is double. You end up with double what you had with the 15-year mortgage.
Yep.
Now, how is this possible? How in the world does it make sense, or can you help us understand how something like this could work? Because it would seem that making a mortgage payment for 30 years would end up costing me a lot more than making a mortgage payment for 15 years.
Yeah, so the reason it doesn't is because of the time value of money. So if I'm, the longer I have to invest, the longer I have to make my money work for me, generally the better result I'm gonna have. And so in the 15-year example, all that's happening is my money is going to pay down this mortgage for the purpose of saving interest. But by doing that, I'm not building another asset. My home's value is independent of the equity value, the money I'm putting in.
Right.
Because imagine, this is my example. I think about, imagine you go to a realtor, like you and I own a house right next to each other. It's same square footage, same lot size, same everything, same decor, same updates, and we have the same realtor. Yours is leveraged. You have a mortgage on yours, and mine's owned free and clear. And I go to our realtor and I go, hey, I want you to sell my house for more than Derek's because I own mine free and clear and Derek's got a mortgage. Realtor's going to go, you're stupid. That's not how that works. Right? So what's happening is when people are prepaying their mortgage, they're just taking one asset that's already there, that's already going to grow on its own, and just trying to get rid of the interest payment to save the interest. And when you look at the flip side of what's possible when you invest for a long period of time, it's almost a no-brainer to make sure that you're actually building wealth outside and independent of the real estate. Because these scenarios don't even factor the actual value of the real estate. Add the actual value of the real estate to that after 30 years. How much more wealth would you have?
Right.
It's crazy.
And that should be the same on in both cases, right? But
Right.
either way, that's a good thing to have. So I think,
And again, just as a disclaimer and a reminder, is this is looking at a 12% return simply because that's what Dave Ramsey espouses that you should be able to get.
right, from his book.
Right, in his book. And so this is just simply testing Dave Ramsey's own numbers on...
Where he recommended a 15-year
Yep,
and not this,
right.
which performed half as well as this did.
Yep.
Now, I think what's happening here mathematically is when you look at what we call an installment debt. So I'm going to put my Mr. Credit cap on for a second.
Oof. All right.
Just letting you know.
Okay.
What we call an installment debt, which is a debt that has a certain number of payments that need to be made. Those payments are all the same.
Yep.
And you make those payments, and at the end of the installment period, the debt is gone.
Right.
So that's an installment debt. A credit card would be a revolving debt where it's you can add to it, and the payment changes every month depending upon how much you have in there. So an installment debt, like a car loan or a mortgage, is based on simple interest calculation. So simple interest meaning that each month you make your payment, the next month your payment will have more principal and less interest in it. That is called simple interest. Whereas these investments are calculated based on compounding interest, or as you mentioned, the time value of money.
Yep.
Compounding interest. So they build on top of themselves. And I think that's what's mathematically making this thing work so much in your favor, is that you're taking that simple interest debt and you're saying, I'll extend my simple interest so I can at the same time extend my compound interest,
On the
which
investment.
just simply outruns the simple interest and eventually runs away.
Well, and you also have to think about, I mean, from an anecdotal standpoint, right? Is there any place other than on real estate that you can borrow money for 30 years with a 4% or 4.5 or even a 5% interest rate? Is there any other space? Can you do it on a car? Can you do it on, with unsecured? No, right? So a mortgage allows you to borrow the most amount of money for the longest period of time with the least payment or least interest, tax deductible currently.
In some cases.
In some cases. And you have to consider when you have an installment debt, inflation's actually working in your favor. Because if I have an installment payment that's, let's say, $2,000 a month, and the next year I get a 3% pay raise, that $2,000 a month is a lower percentage of my total income.
Yeah, it stays the same, yep. It's a hedge.
And so if we were as an industry teaching this, and we're really like embracing it, why would it ever make sense for our industry to teach the removal of that kind of leverage, that kind of power, as a wealth tool? It's the opposite. It's actually a wealth hindrance to remove that kind of a tool.
If you're using it properly, I think, right? That's an important thing to mention, because if you're just getting a mortgage, you're not investing, then you can easily look at your cost to own your home as being higher with the mortgage. So what we're saying here is that it's the leveraging of debt. We used that word earlier.
Yep.
If you know how to leverage the debt properly, meaning you're making a trade. You're saying, I'll take your simple interest debt and I'm going to get my compounding interest investment. I'll take that because I'm just going to simply outrun you in the long run.
In order for something like that to work, you still have to be disciplined to save the money.
Right.
I'm going
Which
to
is
assert
crutch here.
that somebody who's not disciplined enough to save the money also isn't going to have the cash flow available for a 15-year. Like, if we're talking about $44,000 a year going towards a mortgage, you have to have some level of discipline.
True.
To do that.
and keep in mind, you could also, and this is just, you're using a fixed amount of money that's going towards this, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like you're investing more with one or the other. This is a fixed amount of money outflow toward a mortgage and or investing.
Yep.
Yes.
And so that way, you can see here that this is just the same amount of outflow as you would on the 15-year. So if you like the 15-year, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to have the debt. I feel more comfortable knowing my house is going to be paid off in 15 years. With this method here, you're not saying, well, you need to invest more than what you're going to pay on the 15-year. This is taking the 15-year payment, making the 30-year payment and investing the delta. Is that right?
Exactly. And if you want to just hover over where the blue line meets the other line,
This one here?
one more to the left.
This guy?
Yeah, it's almost the 15-year mark anyway. So
I
if
see.
somebody at that point wanted to get rid of their mortgage, they could take what they've saved and wipe it out at that point. But which scenario is more flexible? Having the money in your savings or investments that it's accessible for 15 years, or in real estate that you have a very difficult time getting the money out of?
So and you know what we call that?
No, what do we call that, Derek?
The freedom point.
Yes.
We could also call it the Murica point if you want to.
America.
But this is the freedom point. So there's your 19,000 short there, but then here you're 43 over. So somewhere in between here, your freedom point comes, which is where the value of your assets now exceed the amount that's left in your mortgage. So if you felt like it, you could go, you know what? Write a check.
Bingo.
Boom. Mortgage paid off.
Bingo. And that's really how it should be approached with all debt, especially installment debt. Because the other aspect of installment debt to consider, again, we think of everything from a flexibility standpoint. Most financial advisors would create a graph like this as a way to develop a plan for somebody going forward. We look at a graph like this simply to illustrate concepts. You can't plan based on this. You're not going to get this rate of return every year. You're not going to be able to save that kind of money every year.
Who knows what interest rates are going to be?
Right.
So many factors.
So it's just to illustrate a concept. And one of those concepts that's super powerful is the flexibility of money. And so let's say just as a car payment, right? If I have a car payment and it's $500 a month, and I make an extra payment to that car, what did I do? The next month, is my payment going to be any different? The amount I'm required to make? The answer is no, right? If I made $500, if I made $1,000 this month, next month I'm still going to owe $500. All I'm doing is shortening the duration on the back end.
Right.
So I'm getting rid of my back end duration. That's super inflexible.
Yeah.
So instead, it makes more sense to put the extra payments elsewhere where you have access to. And if you really, really want to get rid of it, which again, that's more of a behavioral issue, if you really, really want to get rid of it, then once the amount you've saved equals what's left,
Go ahead and do it.
but now you're in the habit of taking the excess and saving it, because that's what you've been doing for, let's say, 5 years or 3 years, versus just sticking any excess amount into the debt. And once the debt's gone, going back to spending habits that aren't necessarily great.
So creating good habits is huge with this.
Absolutely.
Now,
Well-
is there any factor in this model here that we're looking at that includes the tax deductions or anything like that, or is this just strictly on the time value of money versus the debt cost?
I mean, that's what's beautiful about the system is Sean and I have been spending a ton of time playing around with this. We could build all of that out. We just figured,
Keep it simple.
For simplicity, yes.
So my point is there's more upside
Excuse me.
here than we're even showing potentially in tax advantages and things like that.
right.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
So when you say conceptually, because you're saying, hey, this is just a concept. These aren't all the exact numbers. This isn't an actual plan. But this just shows you that, hey, if you want to mold a behavior, that gets to 3.5 million instead of one that gets to 1.7.
Yep. Absolutely. Weird how that works. Weird.
It's crazy, but it's huge because when you look, and so let's talk about that car, because right now a lot of cars are 50, 60, 70 grand. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
A lot of cars cost that much money, but you can get great terms on financing. So should you look at the same concept with the car when you can get 0.9% or even 2.9% simple interest
Yeah.
on an installment car loan, does it also make sense to play that game with that situation?
That one,
It's a shorter term, so it's harder
it's
to...
shorter term. It definitely depends. I mean, I'm going to be a lawyer there for a second.
Okay.
It depends. Disclaimer. But generally, generally, if you choose to take out an installment loan, you shouldn't prepay it. As in, if I take out a loan for a car, I should exhaust that and have the extra money I would have put into it go elsewhere, or have paid with cash to get it to begin with and maybe negotiate at a lower price as a result. The middle ground is where The middle ground is where there's a lot of gray area of what you would do, and that would be specific to a client situation.
Okay.
And this is all from trial and error. We've had so many times where in the past, when we just looked at the numbers and not behavior, that we would tell someone, oh yeah, look, you got this much here, take a loan from this 401k because it's your money, knock out the loan on the car, knock out the credit card debt. Now you're paying yourself back, and the numbers look great, and we're so stoked. And then they come in next year to review and look at everything, and they've opened like 3 new credit cards, and they got a loan on a clarinet for their kid. This is an actual situation. And all of that savings we created is gone, and we're like, well, what the heck happened? It's because we didn't address the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The behavior is a big
we've
issue.
had multiple clients like that, and it taught us a lesson that behavior is definitely needs to be addressed and is the most powerful thing.
Absolutely.
And I think understanding and we'll call this simple math, even though it's not technically, but we'll call it the simple math because it does get more complex than this. But also, what's an important thing to understand is that a lot of people think, well, if I have a debt at 4%, then I need to get something that earns 4% in order to cancel it out, or I need to make 8 or 9% on my investment in order to make 4 or 5%. And that's what we're talking about is not actually true as far as how the calculations work. It is not a linear equation where you can just say, well, if my 4% debt needs a 4% return to cancel itself out. And I've actually done this calculation in the past where you have someone paying a 5 or even a 6% mortgage, but earning 3 to 4% on an investment, and these were typically bonds or things I could point at me like, you can get this exactly with that right there, 4.6% or whatever, and it looks more like this, where you will win in the long run because you'll just simply outrun that debt.
Well, and at that point, you have 2 assets that are working in your favor. You've got the real estate growing based on market values, doing that independent aspect, and then you've got your investments growing on a separate, completely different concept. And once the mortgage is gone, now you've got 2 assets that have built pretty substantially. I mean, even if the real estate stayed flat, it's still an asset. It's still there.
Still own it, yeah, absolutely.
So with that concept where I have now 2 things building and the flexibility of it versus piling all my money into this one thing that still has the same value.
Right.
It has to outpace it just from that base concept.
And the thing that's really interesting about that is we talked about cars being like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 now.
Yeah.
But the good news is you can get great financing. At some point, the car dealers decided that it's easier for us to sell a lower payment and a higher price than it is for us to get the interest we really need to make this pencil. So they've rearranged the finances so that the cars are super expensive, but the financing is great because people will buy 0%, 1.9%, all that stuff. So as opposed to, and I'm going to say this personally, I'm not sure what you guys can say and what you can't, but if you have a $60,000 or $70,000 car that you're considering writing a check for, don't. Just go ahead and get that 1% loan or that 2 or 3% loan. Take that money and buy yourself a bond. I mean, you're going to make money on that.
How dare you?
You're going to make money on
What
that.
happens is people throw all their money at their debt and they lose flexibility, and then life happens and they have to go back into debt to handle life. And it's a vicious cycle.
Yep.
That's a good point.
So 0 flexibility, and look at the government.
Well, and if they ever get out of that cycle, it's a constant cycle for most people. All my money goes towards debt. Something comes up I didn't expect. I go back into debt. All my money goes towards that debt. Something comes up I didn't expect. I go back into debt. And if they ever break the cycle, the goal was to get out of debt. So now that the goal is achieved, there's generally not a longer term vision of, oh man, all this money I took, I'm now going to save. It's usually, woo, Vegas, party, right? So if you think about this is where like Sean and I get super excited from a concept of teaching, like financial nerds, right, movement, is let's say you had credit cards. So this is behavior now, right? You had credit cards, you had a car loan, and you made the minimum payments on those things instead of overpaying them.
And that's a hard pill for people to swallow. Make my minimum payment on a credit card, I'm paying 18 to 24%. Like, why would I ever do that?
And then we say, well, 18 to 20% on a credit card is not your problem. Your problem is your behavior and saving. Like you can get rid of the credit card at 18%. You're still not going to have wealth because it's a behavioral issue. So you make the minimum payments, right? Let's say it's $100 here, $20 there, $40 there. And all the extra that you would have funneled towards that, you put towards your assets, and you do a specific amount. Like, I'm going to save 500, 500, 500. Now, once that amount equals or is greater than what that's left, you pay off what you have, and you've already been in the habit. The goal was to save. So now that the debt's gone, that 500 is still going to go towards savings. So what's the payoff for doing that? What's the reward? Well, the reward's all the minimum payments now that aren't going to debt get added to lifestyle. So now you just increase your lifestyle by 100 here, 30 there, 40 there, 200 on that car payment.
I like the upside on that.
Yeah.
Well, and it
That's
may
a great
sound
concept.
cliche, but having a client watch their assets grow and watch them actually change their habits and see their savings account going up and up and up, it creates a very, very good feeling for them. They feel like they've accomplished something, and they want to keep doing it at that point.
And it is an accomplishment.
Yeah, it is.
It really
huge.
is. It's something that most people are unable to do because, number one, we simply don't teach these things. One of the things that, as Mr. Credit, I went into the high schools and really, really was a proponent for was trying to teach people how to do this. I got one high school in San Diego County that allowed me to go in and talk about it.
Because they have to be impartial.
And they keep asking me to come back. And I think the reason they keep asking me to come back is because the kids keep saying, wow, that was really eye-opening. And these are seniors who are about to graduate. A lot of them have already committed to colleges. A lot of them have already committed themselves, mentally at least, to a major or a career.
Yep.
And yet they haven't understood a thing about debt as it relates to their credit, with regards to how does debt work with my credit score? What is a credit
neither
score?
have college students.
And college students haven't either. So they don't teach it in school.
I mean, neither have most
So,
adults. Just to be fair.
but that's what I mean. It's
Right.
a major accomplishment because you have to seek this information out on your own. You have to seek advice from people who are studying this stuff like yourselves, who know what's going on and can look at your situation from an outside perspective. The hardest thing for most people is you're too close to it. You've already justified all the things that you're doing wrong. You've already said it's okay for me to do this because it's okay for me to lose 500 a weekend at the casino because that's my only time I'm having fun. That's my only time away from whatever it is. You've already justified the things you're doing wrong.
Right.
Well, and people are generally going to, psychologically, so oddly enough, I spent a lot of the first years of my career learning finance. And then I realized that most people don't make decisions about money from a money standpoint. They make decisions about money from a psychological, behavioral standpoint. So then I started learning about human psychology and human behavior. And it's a concept called confirmation bias. It's where I believe, because of whatever I've heard, that debt is bad and I need to get rid of debt. So then I seek out information that confirms the bias that I have. And there's more than enough people that are ready to give it to you because they sell.
Sure.
Right? So, I mean, you look at the people. I mean, a client sent me the other day a video on this thing called the debt weapon. This guy was talking about something called the debt weapon. Coined super well. And all it basically was taking a line of credit and using it to wipe out other debt and then putting your paycheck towards a line of credit and then wiping out other debt and putting it towards a line of credit. And you sit back and it's like, well, why do these things exist? And it's because it's easier to sell to human behavior that's bad than it is to shift it and to teach what is the right ways to build wealth, what's going to be the most powerful options that are out there, because it's counterintuitive. And that's why the name of our firm is Paradigm Shift Financial, because we're not taking the easy route. We're taking the route that's the right way, that's going to produce results, that's going to help the most people in the most situations. Versus, I mean, it'd be super easy just to, oh, you want to pay down your debt? Let me teach you how to do that. Pay me $1,000. But it's not going to build wealth for them.
Right. It's not going to work. If you want it to work, you need the paradigm shift, and you need these hats right here.
This is our support of
Unless you have a
America.
flag like this, right there. Thank you guys so much for coming. This is really eye-opening.
Thanks
Tremendous
for having us.
stuff.
Yeah.
We just made you smarter than everyone else. It was guaranteed. I told you it would happen. Share this video. We'll see you soon.